view of your life so far? What would you say?
Oh my God. That's one lucky bitch.
For Angie Dickinson, the affair with Frank Sinatra wasn't just a Hollywood romance. It was a lesson written in heartbreak. It taught her that love without respect is just control dressed in charm. And it left her with a truth she never denied. He's the one man I truly hated, because he made me love him first. By the mid-1970s, Angie Dickinson had transformed her pain into power. After years of emotional turmoil and heartbreak, she rose stronger than ever. Not because Hollywood handed her redemption, but because she fought for it. I realized, she once said, that no one was going to save me. Not a man. Not the movies. Not fame. I had to save myself. Her biggest triumph came when she landed the groundbreaking role of Sergeant Pepper Anderson in the hit TV series Policewoman, 1974-1978. The show wasn't just a success, it was revolutionary. Angie became one of the first women in television to lead a serious police drama, breaking barriers in an industry still hesitant to see women in power. That role changed everything, she said. After years of being seen as just a pretty face, I finally got to show I had more to offer. But while the public celebrated her as a trailblazer, few knew the emotional battle she was fighting behind the scenes. The wounds from her past, particularly her tumultuous relationship with Frank Sinatra, still lingered like shadows in the corners of her mind. When you've been made to feel small by someone you loved, Angie said, you start to question your worth. Even success doesn't silence that voice right away. She poured her strength into her work, often staying long hours on set, refusing to let anyone doubt her capability. Yet, in quiet moments, she admitted that the loneliness sometimes crept back in. People saw the strong woman on screen, she reflected, but off camera, I was still learning how to believe in myself again. It wasn't until years later, when she began to speak openly about her experiences, that Angie truly began to heal. She started attending charity events, mentoring younger actresses, and using her platform to discuss how Hollywood often romanticized toxic relationships. Without naming names, she spoke of men who used affection as power, and of the women who stayed silent out of fear. Her candor surprised many, especially those who had long seen her as the epitome of grace and restraint. But Angie was done pretending. I've lived long enough to stop worrying about who I offend, she said. If my story helps another woman walk away from someone who treats her badly, then it's worth telling. Over time, her resentment toward Sinatra began to fade, replaced by something more complex, understanding. I think I finally saw him for what he was, brilliant, insecure, and afraid to be vulnerable, she said. He hurt people because he didn't know how to love them without control. That realization didn't excuse his actions, but it allowed Angie to stop carrying the weight of his mistakes. You can't keep hating someone forever, she reflected. It eats away at you. I had to let go, not for him, but for me. Still, forgiveness didn't come easily. When Sinatra passed away in 1998, Angie was asked for a comment. Her response was simple, yet profound. He was unforgettable, and that's both a blessing and a curse. Those who knew her best said that while she didn't attend his funeral, she did light a candle for him that night, a private farewell to a man who had shaped so much of her life, for better and for worse. As the years went on, Angie began focusing on the parts of her story that brought her pride, not pain. She reflected on her friendship with Dean Martin, her marriage to Burt Bacharach, and her decision to step back from the spotlight to care for their daughter, Nikki. I've had a full life, she said softly. Not perfect, not easy, but full. And when she looked back on her younger self, the bright-eyed actress who once believed love could conquer everything, she didn't feel pity. She felt gratitude. That girl learned the hard way, Angie said. But she survived, and she became me, In the end, Angie Dickinson didn't let her heartbreak define her. She let it refine her. Her career became a testament to resilience. Her story a quiet rebellion against the idea that a woman's worth depended on any man. She may have once said she truly hated him more than anyone. But by the time the curtain began to close on her legendary life, that hatred had melted into wisdom. Maybe hate is just love that's been burned too many times, she mused. And once the fire dies, all that's left is truth. As Angie Dickinson entered the later chapters of her life, the Hollywood spotlight that once shone so brightly began to dim. But for her, it was a welcome calm. The constant buzz of fame had lost its magic long ago. "I spent my youth chasing lights," she once said, "but I found peace in the shadows." Now in her 80s, Angie had become a living legend, one of the last links to the golden age of Hollywood, a bridge between the glamour of the past and the grit of modern storytelling. But more importantly, she had finally learned to live without bitterness. The woman who once admitted she truly hated him more than anyone had transformed that hatred into wisdom, and that wisdom into strength. In interviews, Angie often reflected on the price of her fame. Back then, she said, a woman was either adored or ignored. There wasn't much in between. She recalled the loneliness of hotel rooms, the false promises of love from men who only wanted to control her, and the endless pressure to stay flawless in an industry obsessed with youth. "It wasn't the cameras that broke me," she confessed softly. "It was the silence when they stopped rolling." But what truly defined her later years wasn't sadness. It was grace. She embraced a quieter life, filled with family visits, small dinners with old friends, and long afternoons of reflection. Though she never completely left Hollywood, she no longer needed its validation. "I gave it my best," she said with a gentle smile, "and I don't owe it anything more." Her relationship with Burt Bacharach, though long over, had given her the greatest gift of all: her daughter, Nikki. Angie's love for her was unconditional and fierce. When Nikki tragically passed away in 2007, Angie faced her greatest heartbreak yet. "There are no words for that kind of loss," she admitted. "You just keep breathing, one day at a time." That loss changed her forever, grounding her in a quiet strength few could comprehend. In her solitude, Angie often revisited memories of her past, some sweet, some painful. When asked in a 2019 interview if she ever forgave the man she once truly hated, her answer was surprisingly tender. "I think I did," she said after a long pause, "because hate takes too much from you. And when you get older, you realize peace is worth more than pride." She spoke fondly of the old Hollywood crowd, of Sinatra, Dean Martin, and all the laughter, chaos, and heartbreak that came with that era. "We were all just trying to survive it," she said. "We thought we were invincible. Turns out we were just human." Friends who visited her in her later years described her as warm, sharp, and deeply reflective. She would sit on her patio in Beverly Hills, sipping tea, surrounded by old photographs, a time capsule of her incredible journey. She laughed easily, but when she spoke of the past, her words carried the weight of a life truly lived. "Do I have regrets?" she once mused. "Of course. Who doesn't? But I learned to stop living in them. Every mistake taught me something, even the painful ones, especially those." As the years went by, tributes poured in from younger actresses who credited Angie as their inspiration. Women like Michelle Pfeiffer, Sandra Bullock, and Jodie Foster, who saw in her a blueprint for fearless femininity. "She made it okay for women to be both strong and vulnerable," one actress said. "Angie showed us we could own our power and our pain at the same time." In one of her final public appearances, Angie summed up her philosophy with a smile that still held the spark of the woman who once ruled the screen. "Life isn't about staying beautiful," she said. "It's about staying real. That's the only kind of beauty that lasts." Today, as fans look back on her remarkable legacy, Angie Dickinson's story stands as a powerful reminder of resilience, forgiveness, and self-worth. She faced heartbreak, betrayal, loss, and loneliness. And yet, she never let any of it define her end. In the end, the woman who once admitted she truly hated him more than anyone didn't let hatred be her legacy. She chose peace instead. And in that choice, Angie Dickinson, the star, the survivor, the woman, found her truest form of grace. For decades, Hollywood saw Angie Dickinson as the ultimate symbol of grace, strength, and glamour. From her breakout role in Rio Bravo to her fierce portrayal of Sergeant Pepper Anderson in Police Woman, Angie was the embodiment of confidence, a woman who could hold her own in a world dominated by powerful men. But behind the elegant smile and timeless beauty, there was a story of deep resentment, a wound she carried for years and a name she refused to forget. "I truly hated him," she once confessed in a rare and emotional interview, "more than anyone else." The man in question wasn't just another Hollywood co-star or fleeting romance. He was someone who had shaped her career, her heart, and ultimately her view of the industry she helped define. Angie Dickinson had spent a lifetime surrounded by leading men: Frank Sinatra, John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Burt Reynolds among them. But one of them left a mark so painful that even decades later, she struggled to forgive him, for the world. She was the woman who could charm anyone. For him, she was simply another name on a long list of Hollywood conquests. What began as admiration turned to betrayal, and that betrayal turned into anger that would simmer for years beneath the surface of Angie's glittering career. By the time she finally spoke about it, Angie was no longer the Hollywood ingenue everyone adored. She was older, wiser, and brutally honest. "I've seen it all," she said. "And I've learned that fame doesn't protect you from heartbreak. Sometimes it causes it." What really happened between Angie Dickinson and the man she said she truly hated more than anyone? How did their relationship, once full of promise, turn into one of the bitterest rivalries in old Hollywood? The truth, as Angie finally revealed, was darker and more personal than anyone ever imagined. Before she was a household name, Angie Dickinson was a young woman chasing a dream in an industry built on charm, ego, and illusion. In the late 1950s, Hollywood was a kingdom ruled by powerful men, directors, producers, and leading actors who could make or break a career with a single phone call. Angie, with her golden hair, sharp wit, and magnetic screen presence, quickly became one of the brightest rising stars of her generation. But it was during this rise that she met the man who would change everything, and not for the better. The man was Frank Sinatra, one of the most powerful figures in entertainment at the time. They met on the set of Ocean's 11 in 1960. Frank was already a legend, the ultimate showman, surrounded by fame, music, and the Rat Pack. Angie, though young, was no ordinary starlet. She was confident, intelligent, and strong-willed, qualities that immediately caught Sinatra's attention. "Frank loved women who had fire," she once said. "And I had plenty of it." Their chemistry was undeniable. On screen and off, sparks flew. But while their relationship began with laughter and glamour, it quickly turned into something darker, something Angie would one day look back on with bitterness and regret. He was charming, magnetic, she admitted, but also cruel when he wanted to be. You never really knew which Frank you were going to get. At first, Angie was swept away by the magic of it all: private dinners, late-night phone calls, and whispered promises. Sinatra made her feel special, like she was part of his exclusive world. But behind the charm, there was control. Frank had a way of testing the people closest to him, of reminding them who really held the power. And Angie, independent as she was, didn't take kindly to being controlled. Their arguments were explosive. Sinatra's temper was legendary, and Angie's refusal to play the submissive Hollywood girlfriend only fueled his fury. "I think he respected me for standing up to him," she once said. "But he also hated that he couldn't control me." And that's when things started to break. Angie began to see the side of Frank that others only whispered about. The jealousy, the manipulation, the quick temper that could turn affection into anger in an instant. He had this ability to make you feel like the only person in the world one moment, and like you didn't exist the next, she said. It was emotional whiplash. By 1962, their relationship had become a toxic mix of love, pride, and resentment. Frank would disappear for weeks without explanation, only to call Angie in the middle of the night, as if nothing had happened. "He knew how to draw me back in," she recalled. "He'd say the right thing, sing the right song, and I'd forgive him again. Until I didn't." The final breaking point came during a public event in Las Vegas. Angie attended with Frank, expecting another glamorous night among Hollywood's elite. Instead, she was humiliated. "He ignored me the whole evening," she said. "It was like I wasn't even there. He flirted with other women right in front of me." That night, she walked out and never looked back. But the emotional scars stayed with her. "I truly hated him after that," she confessed years later. "Not because he broke my heart, but because he made me doubt myself. He made me believe I wasn't enough." For Angie, the experience shattered her illusion of Hollywood romance. The industry she once saw as a place of dreams suddenly looked like a stage of manipulation and power games. "Frank taught me a lot," she said, "mostly about what love shouldn't feel like." In the years that followed, their paths would cross again, sometimes on friendly terms, sometimes coldly distant. But Angie never forgot how it felt to be loved and discarded by one of the most famous men in the world. "He made me stronger," she said, "but he also made me harder." And though she moved on to other great loves and greater roles, the bitterness toward Sinatra never completely faded. "He was the one man I could never forgive," Angie admitted. "The one man I truly hated." When Angie Dickinson walked away from Frank Sinatra, she thought she was leaving the pain behind. But Hollywood doesn't let go of its stories that easily, especially one that involved old blue eyes and one of the industry's most beautiful rising stars. For years, their affair would follow Angie like a shadow, shaping her career, her reputation, and her ability to trust again. At the height of her fame, Angie was adored by audiences for her poise and toughness. In Rio Bravo, she matched wits with John Wayne. In Policewoman, she became a symbol of female empowerment long before it was common in Hollywood. But behind that image of strength was a woman who had been bruised emotionally, not just by heartbreak, but by the power imbalance that had nearly destroyed her self-worth. Frank could make you feel like a queen one day and like nothing the next, Angie later revealed. It wasn't just love. It was a game of control. Hollywood, at the time, wasn't kind to women who stood up for themselves. Angie had refused to be another one of Sinatra's quiet companions, and word spread quickly through the industry. "When you cross Frank," one studio insider warned her, "you don't just lose the man, you lose the machine." Indeed, after their breakup, Angie noticed subtle changes. The phone calls from certain producers stopped. Invitations to Sinatra's famous parties, where roles were often informally decided, no longer came. It wasn't an official blacklist, but it felt like one. "He had that kind of power," Angie admitted. "People didn't want to upset him, and I was the reminder of what happened when you did." Still, Angie refused to play the victim. She poured her energy into her work, choosing roles that reflected her own strength. But no matter how successful she became, the emotional damage lingered. "He taught me what charm can hide," she said. "You can have the most magnetic man in the world and still feel completely alone beside him." Her personal relationships, after Sinatra, suffered too. She dated other high-profile men, Dean Martin, Glenn Ford, and even Burt Bacharach, whom she eventually married. But trust was always a struggle. Frank set the bar for both the best and worst kind of love, Angie confessed. He could make your heart soar and then break it in the same breath. Even after her marriage to Bacharach began, Sinatra's ghost seemed to linger. Burt, a man of precision and control himself, sometimes mirrored the emotional distance that Angie had fought so hard to escape. "It's funny," she said years later. "You think you've left the pain behind, but you end up repeating it with different faces." Despite her public grace, friends close to Angie said she never fully recovered from the emotional manipulation she experienced. Frank changed her, one longtime friend revealed. She became more guarded, more skeptical of men. She laughed less, and when she did, there was always a trace of sadness. When asked decades later if she ever forgave Sinatra, Angie paused before answering. "Forgive?" she repeated softly. "Maybe in the smallest way, but forget? Never." Still, there was a strange complexity to her emotions. Even in her resentment, there remained a trace of affection. She could acknowledge his brilliance, his charisma, his musical genius, but she could never excuse the pain he caused. "He was one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived," she said, "and one of the most difficult men to love." In her later years, Angie began to speak more openly about how women in Hollywood were treated during that era. She didn't name names often, but her words carried weight. "People think glamour protects you," she said. "It doesn't. Sometimes it makes you more vulnerable, because everyone assumes you're untouchable." And though Sinatra passed away in 1998, the emotions tied to him lived on in Angie's memory. Even near the end of her career, interviewers couldn't resist asking about the great love affair between them. Her answer never changed. "He was unforgettable," she'd say, her voice steady but her